Welcome to Crushed Husband. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin. The phone rang at exactly 8:30 a.m., like it always did. I didn't even have to check the screen. Only one person called me at that hour, like clockwork. "Hi, Dad," Lana said before I could even say hello. "Quick question. Are you free Saturday night?" My name is Rowan Eastwick. I'm 76 years old. I live alone in a little bungalow just outside Aurora, Illinois. Retired electrical engineer, widower, father to one daughter who remembers I exist when it's convenient. I rubbed the sleep out of my eyes, still in my robe. I suppose I am. Why? She didn't waste time. Trevor's awards banquet is this weekend. Big deal, lots of press, his firm's partners will be there. I thought it'd be nice if you came. The way she said nice made it sound more like required. I paused. "You want me to come to Trevor's event?" "Yes," she said, impatient. "And bring your custard tarts. People still talk about them from Christmas. Just make sure you wear something decent, okay?" She didn't say please. She didn't ask if I wanted to come, just assumed I'd fall in line. "And maybe," she added, her tone sharpening, "try to behave this time. Last time you brought up hydroelectric circuit redundancy during dessert, and Trevor's boss glazed over like a jelly donut. I was answering a question he asked. She said, "just don't make it weird." Weird, right. I was weird now. "Of course," I said flatly. "I'll be on my best behavior." "Great, thanks, Dad. Oh, and don't be late. Cocktail hour starts at 6 sharp. She hung up before I could respond. I sat there on the edge of the bed, staring at the phone like it had personally insulted me. The silence in the room felt heavier than usual. It's been 7 years since Nora died. 7 years since the house lost its heartbeat. And ever since the funeral, Lana's visits became less about seeing me and more about checking a box. She used to come by every other week, then monthly. Now I see her on holidays. And only the ones that make good photos for her social media. I still pay for her family's life, even if they don't know it. When Miles got accepted to that overpriced private school, I quietly covered the tuition. When they went to Barcelona last summer, I wired the money to Lana's account the day before their flight. She never asked, never said thank you. Probably assumed some bonus of Trevor's covered it. And here I was again, called upon, like a trusty backup generator, quietly useful, largely forgotten. But I said yes, of course I did, because that's what fathers do even when their daughters treat them like an old man in a dusty frame. Because pride has its limits, and duty, especially to Nora's memory, demands more. I stood up and walked toward the bathroom. Time to shave. Time to press the one blazer I owned that didn't smell like mothballs. Time to bake the tarts Nora used to make every Easter. Time to put on the act. Because apparently, I'd been cast in a show. Not as a father, not even as a guest. Just a background extra with good pastries. The next morning, I shaved. First time in 2 weeks. My hand shook a little near the jawline. Not age, just nerves I didn't want to name. I trimmed my eyebrows, even dabbed a bit of pomade into the thinning gray on my head. I looked in the mirror and tried to see what Lana saw. Still looked like me. After that, I dug out the old ceramic mixing bowl from the top shelf of the pantry, the one Nora used every Easter for her tarts. The rim had a chip on one side, a faint crack spidering down the center, but I couldn't bring myself to replace it. I lined up the ingredients on the counter. Eggs, sugar, cream, flour, vanilla. Everything from scratch, no shortcuts. The kitchen smelled like memory, not all at once. It came in waves, cinnamon and lemon zest. Nora humming along to the radio, soft jazz from some station up in Madison. Lana sitting on the floor in pigtails, licking the wooden spoon and giggling whenever her mom swatted at her with a towel. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand before the tears could fall. While the dough chilled in the fridge, I sat down in the living room and opened the old photo box, the one with the sliding lid and the fading sticker that read, Vacation 89. I flipped past beach shots, school recitals, and one of Lana riding on my shoulders at a Cubs game, maybe 7 or 8 years old, laughing like life didn't have edges. She used to call me her best friend. Now she called at 8:30 to tell me how to dress. I stopped on a photo of Nora, mid-laugh, holding a plate of steaming tarts fresh from the oven. There was flour on her cheek, and her eyes were locked on me like I was the only thing in the room. I don't think I'd ever been loved like that before, or since. The oven dinged. I set the photo down gently and stood up. By noon, the tarts were cooling on wire racks. Perfect golden crusts, custard set just right, dusted with nutmeg like Nora used to do. I covered them in foil and placed them in the fridge. Later that day, I walked into the spare bedroom where I keep the overflow of framed pictures. I picked up the one from my 70th birthday, the last time the whole family had been together. Lana had arranged a small gathering at her house. When I handed Miles a card with a $1,000 check inside, he glanced at it and mumbled, "Cool," before tossing it on the table and walking off. That card was still on the table when I left, unopened. Trevor barely said 3 words to me the whole night. Just, "Hey, thanks," and "gates open." No cake, no speech, no photograph of me with my daughter or grandson. Just a quiet departure and the sound of the recycling bin closing as I pulled away. I should have been used to it by now. But even after all these years, the ache surprised me. That night, I made a list. Jacket cleaned, shoes polished, custard tarts boxed, smiles rehearsed. I folded the list, placed it in my coat pocket, and stood by the hallway mirror. "Behave," I whispered to my reflection, then turned off the light. The valet barely glanced at me when I pulled up in my '98 Buick, but I didn't take it personally. I stepped out slowly, balancing the pastry box on one palm, and adjusted my blazer. The scent of vanilla custard drifted up through the foil, warm and sweet. Nora would have smiled. The venue was one of those slick modern places downtown. Glass walls, slate tiles, pendant lighting that probably cost more than my first house. A sign out front read, "Sarner, Meacham, and Finch, Annual Recognition Gala," in looping gold script. Inside, everything smelled like eucalyptus and polished ambition. I found Lana near the entrance, already holding a champagne flute and scanning the room like a hawk. She spotted me and walked over quickly in her heels. "You're late," she said. I checked my watch. "It's 5:42. Invitation said 6. "Well, the partners are here already. And you were supposed to help set the dessert table." She plucked the tarts from my hands without a thank you. "Please tell me you used the original recipe." I did. "Good." She turned, then paused. "And try to just blend in, okay? No shop talk tonight." Shop talk. That's what she called 42 years in electrical grid design. I bit the inside of my cheek and followed her through the crowd. Trevor was in the center of it all, holding court like a game show host. His laugh was too loud, his handshakes too firm, his hair too gelled. He wore a navy suit with no tie, the kind of casual that still cost $800. "Rowan!" he boomed when Lana dragged me into the circle. "Glad you made it. Everyone, this is Lana's dad. He used to do something with power lines, right?" "High voltage grid development," I said. "Utility scale integration," and Lana cut me off with a quick laugh. "It's a bit technical, honestly. He's retired now." One of the men in the group, gray beard, probably a partner, nodded politely. "Always good to have the whole family out for nights like this." Trevor clapped my shoulder like I was a prop. "And the tarts he makes, unreal. Way better than anything you'll find at the buffet. He's kind of a dessert legend in the family." I smiled tightly. I wasn't here as family. I was here as a sideshow. We moved to our table. I was between Lana and Miles, who had his AirPods in one ear and his phone in both hands. I tried. "How's school?" He didn't look up. "It's fine," I nodded. "Still interested in that summer robotics camp?" He shrugged. "Dunno. Might do Europe with friends." He said it like it was nothing, like he hadn't even asked who paid for that plane ticket. Dinner was served, some sort of deconstructed salmon dish I didn't recognize. As we ate, the MC began calling names, handing out plaques, and Trevor kept leaning toward Lana to whisper jokes. At one point, he gestured toward me and said something I couldn't hear, and a few people at the next table laughed. I stared at my untouched tart on the dessert plate. The crust looked perfect. I didn't feel like eating it. After the applause ended and the band started playing again, I stood up and told Lana I was going to stretch my legs. She didn't even look up. "Try not to get lost," she said. And I walked away, unnoticed, toward the quiet courtyard outside. The courtyard was quiet compared to the buzz inside, just the hush of fountains and the low murmur of wind through trimmed hedges. I found a stone bench beneath a light post and sat, slowly, my knees groaning as they always did. Across from me, water spilled gently from a raised marble bowl into a shallow pool, probably some minimalist tribute to serenity. I just needed to breathe. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the noise of the banquet fade from my ears. Nora would have hated this whole ordeal, all the schmoozing, the hierarchy of ego. She used to say awards banquets were grown-up birthday parties minus the sincerity. Grandpa? I opened my eyes. Miles stood nearby, hands in his jacket pockets, the phone finally tucked away. For a second, I thought he'd wandered out by accident. But then he stepped forward and sat beside me. "Hey," he said, quieter now. I nodded. "Hey." We sat in silence for a beat. I watched the water flicker in the artificial light. He spoke first. "That thing you said at dinner, about grid integration, what does that mean exactly?" I turned toward him, surprised. "You remember that?" He gave a little shrug. "Kind of. I've just always wondered what you did, I guess. Mom never really explained it." Of course she hadn't. "Well," I said, "my work was about taking energy from different sources, hydro, nuclear, solar, and getting them to work together in the same system. The goal is efficiency, stability, keeping the lights on when the wind stops blowing." He blinked. "So like, the backbone of the whole grid?" I chuckled. "Close enough." He looked down at the fountain. "That's actually kinda cool." A warmth settled in my chest, faint but real. I studied his profile for a moment, saw a glimpse of the little boy who used to bring me broken remote control cars and sit on my workbench while I soldered parts. Maybe that version of him still lives somewhere in there. "You ever build anything?" I asked. "I made a little drone once for school," he said, "but it never worked right, kept veering left and crashing into the bushes. You know why? I think I wired the motor backward." I smiled. "That's a classic," he smirked. "Yeah, you probably would have fixed it in 10 minutes. I wanted to tell him I would have helped, that I'd have sat on the floor with him, tools spread out like puzzle pieces, and made it right. But before I could speak, a voice called from behind us. "Miles?" We both turned. 3 boys around his age stood near the stone archway. One of them waved. "We're gonna check out the rooftop bar. You coming?" Miles stood, hesitated, then looked at me. I'll catch up in a sec." "You good?" He nodded. "Yeah." The boys disappeared. Miles turned to me again. "Sorry, I should..." "Go," I said gently. "They're waiting." He shifted awkwardly. "Thanks, Grandpa, for, I don't know, talking." I nodded once. He jogged off, disappearing into the noise. I stared back at the water. The brief spark of connection faded fast, like steam from a cooling cup. I was alone again. Then came the footsteps. "Lana." "There you are," she snapped, heels clicking. "God, we've been looking everywhere." I didn't speak. I just exhaled. "You just wander off without telling anyone? You realize how that looks?" "Better than being a footnote," I muttered. "What's that supposed to mean?" I stood slowly. "Nothing." She crossed her arms. "Honestly, Dad, this whole night you've been sulking, sitting off by yourself, whispering to Miles like you're plotting something." I blinked. "I was explaining you were embarrassing him." My mouth dropped open. "You think he wants to hear about transformers and grids in front of his friends? He's not 10 anymore." I tried to find the words, something calm, measured. Then, without warning, she shoved me. It wasn't hard, more like a firm 2-handed push, but my feet caught the edge of the marble, and I staggered backwards into the fountain. The cold hit like a slap. I went down with a splash, water soaking through my slacks, my blazer, even into my shoes. The world went silent for a beat, except for the drip of water and the flutter of startled gasps behind me. I sat up slowly, my glasses crooked, my dignity gone. Behind me, someone laughed, then another, then a ripple of snickering from the patio above. Lana stood motionless, eyes wide, hand over her mouth. But she didn't move toward me, didn't offer a hand. No one did. I pulled myself up, shoes squelching, and stepped out of the fountain. No applause, no concern, just murmurs and pitying looks. I straightened my jacket, wiped my glasses, and turned toward the glass doors. My daughter didn't follow. My grandson didn't call out. My family watched me walk away, soaked, humiliated, and said nothing. That's when I knew. I wasn't family anymore. I was a prop. And they'd rather laugh at me than love me. I drove home in silence, the damp of my soaked clothes seeping into the seat cushions. Every turn of the wheel felt heavy, like I was steering through mud. I didn't even bother turning on the radio. The slap of my wet slacks against the upholstery was humiliating enough. My hands shook on the steering wheel when I pulled into the driveway. Inside, I stripped off the blazer and shirt in the hallway. Water dripped from my cuffs onto the hardwood. I left them in a pile and walked to the bathroom, bare feet slapping softly against the cold floor. When I caught my reflection in the mirror, I had to look away. I sat down on the edge of the tub and finally let it come. The tears. I hadn't cried in years, not since Nora, and even then it had been silent, a slow leak in the dark, not this. Not sobs that pulled from deep in my chest, that cracked my ribs open and spilled out everything I'd swallowed for 7 years. I cried for the man I used to be. I cried for the girl Lana used to be. And I cried for the sick, painful truth that I didn't belong to them anymore. When it passed, I rinsed my face and stood up slowly. There was no dramatic revelation, no sudden fury, just a sharp, clean stillness, the kind that comes before you finally change everything. The next morning, I made tea, put on a fresh shirt, and sat at the kitchen table with my checkbook, my laptop, and the number from my financial advisor. "Martin," I said when he picked up, "I need to make a few changes." It took an hour, but by the end of it, the tuition account for Miles had been shut down. The automatic monthly wire transfer to Lana's mortgage, canceled. The emergency fund I kept in case Trevor's firm had a tight quarter, gone. I asked Martin to redirect the bulk of the assets into a private trust, one with no beneficiaries. He didn't question me. He just said, "Understood, mister." Eastwick, and that was that. Next, I called my attorney. "I need to update my will," I said. "My daughter and her family are to be removed entirely." There was a pause on the line. Then, "All right, do you have a new beneficiary in mind?" "Not yet, but it won't be them." I hung up. My tea had gone cold. Then I opened a drawer in the kitchen and pulled out the old manila envelope labeled Realtor, Retirement. I'd started it when Nora and I first talked about downsizing. There were brochures in there from coastal towns she loved: Rockport, Bar Harbor, Cape May. One place stood out: Annapolis, Maryland, quiet, ocean breeze. We had gone there once for our 25th anniversary, stayed in a tiny inn with blue shutters and a view of the marina. Nora had spent an hour standing on the dock watching the sailboats, said it felt like the whole world exhaled. I called the number on the card stapled to the top brochure. "Hi, I'm looking to relocate," I said. "Somewhere quiet, coastal. I'd like to see listings this week." I gave her my name. She asked for my budget. When I told her, she went quiet for a beat. "Well," she said, "you'll have no problem finding something beautiful." That afternoon, I packed a single suitcase. Just enough for a few nights, just enough to start. I stood at the foot of the stairs and looked up toward the second floor, toward the empty bedroom that still held Nora's perfume in the corners, the guest room where Miles used to sleep over, the boxes I'd never opened since the funeral. I'd grieved quietly, waited patiently, gave everything they needed, and still I was thrown into a fountain like a party trick. Now I was done waiting, and I wasn't asking permission to leave. The cane was something I found at an antique shop 2 towns over, brass-tipped, oak handle, barely scuffed. It wasn't for walking, it was for theater. I gave Lana a heads up the night before. "Just stopping by tomorrow," I said over voicemail. "Think I left something in the entryway closet, my cane, decorative one. Meant to bring it to that dinner and forgot." She texted back 3 hours later. "Sure, no problem. I'll be home after 10. Just ring." At exactly 10:17 a.m., I pulled into their circular driveway. Same house I helped them afford. Same porch light I'd paid to replace when the wiring shorted last year. I knocked once. The door swung open fast. "Dad!" Lana smiled, too wide. "You didn't have to drive all the way out here for that little thing." She gestured me inside, already turning toward the hall closet. "I'm sure it's just stuff behind the coats." I stepped in, letting the door shut behind me. "Take your time. I'm not in a rush." That was a lie. While she rummaged through hangers and shoe bins, I glanced around the living room. New curtains, framed triptych of their ski trip to Banff. A vase on the table I'd recognize anywhere. My wife Nora had picked it out in Asheville, years ago. Lana had taken it after the funeral. She emerged a moment later, cane in hand. "Here we go," she said, hiding behind Trevor's golf umbrella. I took it gently, turning it once in my hands. "Funny," I said, "how often things get tucked away around here." She laughed politely. "Well, you know how chaotic it gets. Between Miles, work, life." She trailed off, trying to read me. "You look good," she said finally. "Better than last time." I was wet last time, I said flatly. Her smile stiffened. You know I didn't mean for that to happen, she said. You startled me. It was just momentum, I finished. Right. A pause. She adjusted her necklace. Anyway, she said, since you're here, we were actually going to talk to you soon about the refinance. I turned to leave. I won't stay for coffee, she blinked. You just got here? Exactly. I stepped toward the door. She followed. We just thought, Trevor and I, if the new terms come through rough, maybe you could co-sign again, like you did in 2021. I opened the door. Things are just tighter than expected right now, she said, trying to sound casual. And I know how Mom would have wanted a lot of things, I said quietly, starting with you showing up once in a while when she got sick. Lana's face went slack. You want me to feel guilty? I added. But the truth is, I don't owe you a thing. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I stepped through the doorway. The cane clicked once against the porch tile. You should look over your mortgage papers, I said, without turning back. Some of the numbers might surprise you. Dad, wait, she said. Can we at least talk? I paused. You already said everything, I said. I just finally listened. And then I walked to my car, started the engine, and drove away. No dramatic exits, no final embrace, no apologies offered or owed. Just silence in the rearview mirror. And the weight of the cane resting gently across my lap. The first morning in Annapolis, I woke to gulls crying and the faint smell of salt in the air. My new place wasn't fancy. 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, and a narrow wraparound porch that creaked when the wind kicked up. But the ocean was right there, visible from the kitchen window. The kind of view Nora would have stood quietly in front of with a cup of tea, saying nothing, just breathing. Unpacking was easy. I hadn't brought much. A few books, some clothes, my toolbox. I bought new furniture secondhand from a shop down the road. The man who delivered it told me about the community garden 2 blocks away and the Saturday chess club at the rec center. You'd fit in, he said. No one's in a hurry here. That suited me fine. The first week passed in a gentle rhythm. Mornings with a paper and black coffee on the porch. Afternoons planting hydrangeas in the backyard. I walked the beach at low tide, ran my fingers through sea-washed stones, and watched old dogs chase thrown sticks with wild devotion. I stopped checking my phone after day 3. Lana had called once, then twice, then stopped. No messages. No updates, no, "Are you okay?" Not even a passive-aggressive text about Miles's grades or Trevor's new bonus. I didn't miss it. What surprised me most wasn't the peace. It was how fast I stopped needing the noise. For years, my calendar had revolved around other people's demands. I hadn't realized how many birthdays, holidays, and can we talk? Calls had kept me tethered to a family that saw me as a wallet with legs. Now, no one asked me for anything, and I didn't ask myself why. It was maybe 10 days in when I met Lydia. She was crouched over a plot at the community garden, elbow deep in compost, muttering to a stubborn tomato plant. "You're wasting time," she told it. I smiled as I walked by. She looked up, noticed me, and waved me over like we were old neighbors. "You look like someone who knows how to fix things," she said. I laughed. "Used to." "Good. Then you can help me figure out why my irrigation's making that god-awful sputter." That's how it started. I fixed her hose valve. She brought me blueberry muffins the next day. We talked about books. She liked mysteries, I liked nonfiction. And after a while, we didn't bother making excuses to meet. She lived a few streets away. No husband, 1 grown daughter in Seattle she didn't talk to often. "We get along better from a distance," she said once, stirring sugar into her tea. "Some people are easier to love, with an ocean in between." I knew exactly what she meant. She didn't ask questions about my past, just sat beside me on the porch sometimes, reading or watching the sky shift color. Some evenings we played cards, some we didn't speak at all. It wasn't romance, not yet. Maybe not ever, but it was real. I'd never expected to find connection again. I thought I'd end up like one of those men on the bench by the wharf, alone, mostly invisible, occasionally nodding at a stranger who reminded him of someone long gone. But something about this place, this life, was stitching me back together. I wasn't Lana's father here. I wasn't the man who covered Trevor's taxes or Miles's airfare. I was just Rowan, and for the first time in years, that felt like enough. It came on a Tuesday. I found the envelope tucked between a seed catalog and an AARP flyer, handwritten, my name in careful block letters. No return address. I knew the handwriting instantly. I carried it inside, set it on the kitchen table, and stared at it while the kettle boiled. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit next to my mug while I trimmed dead leaves off a potted basil plant and swept sand from the back door. Only after the water cooled and the light outside began to shift did I finally slide a finger under the flap. The letter was 4 pages. Pen. Not typed. Miles's name signed in the bottom corner. Big, unsure, a little slanted. Dear Grandpa, I'm not even sure where to begin, but I guess "I'm sorry" is a good place to start. He talked about the video. Someone had recorded the fountain moment and posted it on a private Snapchat. He said he hadn't laughed, said he felt sick watching it, said that afterward he realized just how far things had gone and how much he'd let slide. I don't know when I became the kind of person who ignores the one guy who always showed up. I wasn't raised to be cruel. I guess I just got used to you always being there. He didn't make excuses, he didn't mention money, he didn't ask for anything. He talked about missing our old walks around the neighborhood, missing the little circuits we used to build on the kitchen counter when he was 10. He said school was a mess, home was worse, and that Trevor barely looked at him anymore. Mom doesn't talk about you, but she's not really talking to anyone much these days. Then this. I'm not writing to get something from you. I just wanted to say, I remember who you were, and I miss it. That part hit me hardest. He closed with, I understand if you never respond, but I hope you will, even just once. I'd like to be the kind of person you'd want to hear from. I read it twice, then a third time. Then I folded it back up and tucked it inside the back of a book Nora once loved. A quiet novel about a man who found peace after everything else in his life fell apart. I didn't answer that day, but later that week I pulled out a sheet of paper and wrote something simple. Dear Miles, thank you for your letter. It meant more than you probably know. I'm still figuring things out here, but I'm doing well. There's nothing to fix, nothing to beg for. The past is behind us. I'm not ready to come back. But the door isn't locked. It's just not wide open. Take care of yourself, and take your time. Grandpa. I mailed it the next morning, no promises, no invitations. But the door, as I wrote, was ajar. She found me on a Thursday. I was trimming back the rose bushes on the front edge of the porch when a silver SUV pulled into the driveway. The plates were Illinois. The engine clicked as it cooled, and when the door opened, there she was. Crisp blouse, sunglasses, and that sharp, stiff posture she always used when she knew she was in the wrong. I stood slowly, dusting my hands on my jeans. Dad, Lana said, pulling off her glasses. Can we talk? I didn't invite her in. I didn't move. I didn't come to fight, she added quickly. I needed to see you. I motioned toward the wooden bench under the awning. 5 minutes. She sat, crossed her legs, smoothed her blouse. I hired someone, she said, almost embarrassed. A private investigator. I didn't know where you went. Miles wouldn't tell me. Smart boy. She looked at the ground. The silence stretched. Then she looked up. Dad, things at home are hard. Trevor's under a lot of stress, and Miles barely talks to us. The bills are piling up, and I feel like everything's unraveling. She paused. I miss you, she said. We all do. I sat across from her, not close. I'm not a solution to your unraveling, I said. I used to be. That ended. I know we made mistakes. Mistakes, I repeated. She swallowed. Okay, we were wrong. I was wrong. But that doesn't mean we stop being family. Funny, I said. You didn't seem so certain of that when you pushed me into a fountain. Her face tightened. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. Lana looked away, blinking too fast. You treated me like a prop, I said calmly. Something you could display or hide depending on the crowd. You cut off my voice, my history, my dignity, and when I stopped being useful, you shoved me aside. Literally. I didn't mean, but you did, I said. You just didn't expect me to leave. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she leaned forward, elbows on her knees. Mom wouldn't want this. That was the first time she'd mentioned Nora in over a year. She'd want us to forgive each other, Lana said. I looked at her, steady and clear. Your mother would want you to show up for people before they're gone. Not after. She would have wanted you to call more, visit more. She'd want you to teach your son what love looks like, not what guilt can buy. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't soften. You called it parenting, I said. But it was convenience. You never asked how I was, never cared what I did. You wanted money, appearances, silence. Lana stood abruptly, like she'd hit her limit. So that's it? I pour my heart out and you throw it back in my face? No, I said. You poured your need, not your heart. She opened her mouth again, then closed it. Her face hardened. You'll regret this, she said. One day you'll wake up and realize you have no one left. I already did, I said. And it's the reason I finally slept. She didn't respond, just grabbed her purse, stepped off the porch, and walked toward the SUV. At the end of the driveway, she stopped and turned. Mom would be disappointed in you. I stood, steady. No, I said. Mom would understand. And then she drove away. No wave, no backward glance. Just the taillights disappearing down the tree-lined road, and the quiet, peaceful hum of a life I didn't need permission to keep. The roses came in late that year, soft coral blooms with a little gold at the tips. Nora would have called them sunset petals. I sat on the terrace with a book in my lap and a glass of iced tea sweating on the railing. Lydia had just left after our usual Thursday morning walk, barefoot down the shoreline, where the rocks were smoothest. She always brought 2 apples and left the cores on the driftwood near the dunes, said they were for the foxes or the ghosts. I liked that about her. She didn't explain everything, she didn't need things fixed. The breeze rolled in from the water, just enough to lift the edges of the paper in my book. I let it. I wasn't in a hurry anymore. The phone still rang sometimes, mostly spam, a few old friends. The calls from Lana had stopped a couple weeks after she left my driveway, though one night I noticed her name had viewed my reply to Miles on the family messaging app. She didn't respond, neither did I. And that was fine. There was no bitterness left, just distance. A calm understanding that not all bridges burn with fire, some just quietly collapse from years of rot. I still had the letter from Miles in a drawer near the bed. I hadn't heard from him again, but I wasn't waiting for it either. He'd find his way, or he wouldn't. But I'd given him something no one else in that house had, the truth, and the grace to grow. Across the street, the neighbor's grandson pedaled up the gravel path on a red bike, wobbling at the corners. He waved, I waved back. The simple rhythm of life. No ceremony, no debt. That evening, Lydia came by again with a batch of shortbread and a dog-eared gardening book. We played 2 games of chess on the patio table and split the cookies between us. She beat me the second round, barely. Next week, she said, standing, you're going down in 3 moves. Only if I'm generous, I said, and we both laughed. After she left, I watched the sun disappear past the roof lines, the sky bleeding out slowly into lilac and then steel gray. I thought about all the years I'd given away, to silence, to obligation, to people who saw me only as a fixture. Now I had a quiet home that smelled like salt and soil, a backyard that bloomed on its own terms, a life I no longer had to audition for. I turned off the porch light, locked the door, and left the cane leaning by the coat rack, more ornament than necessity. That night, I slept with the windows open and the ocean breathing just beyond the trees. No guilt, no questions, no ghosts needing answers, just peace, the kind that doesn't beg for applause, and that was more than enough.